Most people assume the summer heat is the enemy of a vegetable garden. They watch their lettuce bolt, their spinach wilt, their tomatoes stop setting fruit, and they decide that July and August are just dead months. But surprisingly, some vegetables don't merely survive that brutal heat. They wait for it. They sit there in the cool of spring, barely moving, and then the moment the thermometer climbs past 90 degrees, they explode into growth. And here's the part almost nobody tells you. Most of these heat-loving vegetables grow better in a few pots on a hot patio than they ever would in a sprawling in-ground garden, because you control the soil, the drainage, and the warmth around their roots. You don't need a big yard, you don't need shade cloth and misting systems and expensive gadgets. You need the right plants, a handful of containers, and a sunny spot you probably already have. So today we're counting down 10 vegetables that don't just tolerate brutal summer heat, but truly thrive in it. The kind of plants that keep your harvest basket full while your neighbor's garden gives up. We'll go from solid and dependable all the way down to number one, and the plant at number one is the strangest of them all. It actually grows faster the hotter it gets, and once it's established, it can keep feeding you for months on end from a single planting, long after everything else has surrendered to the sun. Before we start, do something simple for me. Drop your growing zone in the comments, or just your state and how hot your summers really get. It helps everyone watching see which of these will work where they live, and I read them. So find your sunniest corner, that patch of patio or balcony that bakes all afternoon, the spot you thought was useless. By the end of this, you'll see it completely differently. Let's get started. At number 10, we have Swiss chard, and right away, this one breaks a rule you've probably been taught. Leafy greens are supposed to be cool season crops. Lettuce, spinach, arugula, they all turn bitter and bolt the second real heat arrives. So most people lump chard in with them and stop planting it in summer. That's a mistake. Swiss chard is actually in the same family as the beet, and that beet heritage gives it a toughness its leafy cousins simply don't have. While spinach is genetically wired to flower and die when the days get long and hot, chard just keeps making leaves. It slows down a little in the worst of the heat, but it does not bolt the way spinach does, and it does not turn bitter nearly as fast. You can harvest the outer leaves again and again, and the plant keeps pushing new growth from the center for months. Here's how to make it thrive on a hot patio. Give each plant a container at least 10 inches deep and 10 inches wide, because that taproot wants room to reach down and pull up moisture. Fill it with a good potting mix, not garden dirt, and keep that mix consistently damp. In a pot, in summer heat, that often means watering every single day, sometimes twice on the hottest afternoons. The single biggest mistake people make is letting a chard container dry out completely, because dry stress is what finally pushes it toward bolting. One quiet trick: if your afternoon sun is absolutely punishing, set the chard pot where it gets full morning sun and a little dappled shade after about 3 in the afternoon. It'll reward you with bigger, more tender leaves. The rainbow stem varieties with the red, gold, and pink stalks aren't just pretty either. They're just as tough as the plain green kind. So chard gives you a steady, season-long supply of greens when greens are supposed to be impossible. But if you want a green that doesn't just survive the heat but genuinely loves it, that leads us to number 9. At number 9 is New Zealand spinach. And this one solves the exact problem that breaks so many summer gardens. You want fresh spinach in July. You plant spinach in July, and within 2 weeks it shoots up a flower stalk, turns bitter, and you're done. It's one of the most frustrating things in gardening. Now, here's the surprise. New Zealand spinach isn't actually spinach at all. It's a completely different plant, native to the coastlines of New Zealand, Australia, and East Asia, and it just happens to taste remarkably like the real thing when you cook it. Because it's not true spinach, it carries none of that built-in urge to bolt in long, hot days. The hotter and longer the summer gets, the more this plant spreads, sending out thick, succulent, triangle-shaped leaves you can pick all season long. It grows as a low, sprawling mat, which makes it perfect for a wide container or window box where it can tumble over the edges. Give it a pot at least 12 inches wide, fill it with rich potting mix, and put it somewhere it gets 6 or more hours of sun. The leaves hold a lot of water inside themselves, which is exactly why it shrugs off heat that would flatten ordinary greens. You harvest it by pinching off the top 2 or 3 inches of each stem, and that pinching actually makes it bushier, so the more you eat, the more it gives. One thing worth knowing, the seeds have a hard outer coat and can be slow and stubborn to sprout, so soak them in water overnight before you plant them. That one step can take germination from frustrating to easy. And always cook the leaves rather than eating them raw. Just a quick steam or saute, which softens their texture and brightens that mild green flavor. So now you've got 2 different greens that laugh at the heat. But let's move out of the leaves and into something that turns sunshine into real substantial food. Because at number 8, the heat isn't just tolerated, it's required. At number 8, we have peppers, both the sweet bells and the hot varieties. And there's a common belief that's quietly costing people their harvest. Folks assume peppers are easy, throw them in early and then panic when a young plant just sits there in spring doing absolutely nothing for weeks. They think something's wrong. Nothing is wrong. Peppers are tropical perennials at heart, and they are simply waiting for warmth. Peppers come from Central and South America, where they evolved in long, hot growing seasons. Their roots want warm soil, and their flowers set fruit best when the days are genuinely hot. This is where containers give you a real edge over the ground. The soil in a dark pot sitting in the sun warms up faster and stays warmer than the cool earth of an in-ground bed, and that extra root warmth is exactly what a pepper craves. A gardener with a few black nursery pots on a hot patio will often pull ripe peppers weeks before the in-ground gardener down the street. Give each pepper plant a container around 5 gallons in size, roughly the size of a standard bucket, with good drainage holes. Peppers actually like to be a little snug, so you don't need anything enormous. Keep the soil evenly moist but never soggy, and once the plant starts flowering, a steady supply of nutrients keeps the fruit coming. Here's a detail many people miss. If daytime temperatures climb above about 95 degrees, some large bell peppers will drop their blossoms temporarily. Don't pull the plant. It recovers and sets a heavy flush of fruit as soon as the most extreme heat eases. If you live somewhere truly scorching, lean toward the smaller, thinner-walled hot peppers and the compact sweet varieties, because they set fruit reliably even when the big bells sulk. Pick peppers regularly too, because every pepper you harvest signals the plant to make more. So peppers turn relentless sun into a steady crop. But there's a close cousin of the pepper that handles the heat even more gracefully, and it brings us to number 7. At number 7 is eggplant, and this is the vegetable that quietly outlasts almost everything else in a heat wave. Tomato plants, its close relatives, will stop setting fruit when nights stay hot and sticky. The pollen literally becomes less viable in extreme heat. But the eggplant just keeps right on going, flowering and fruiting through conditions that shut its famous cousin down completely. The reason comes down to where it's from. Eggplant traces back to the hot regions of South and East Asia, and it was bred over thousands of years for exactly these conditions. It wants heat. It wants sun. It wants warm roots. When you give an eggplant a container in a sun-drenched spot, you're recreating its ideal home. A glossy purple eggplant ripening on a hot August afternoon when half the garden is stalled is one of the great quiet rewards of summer growing. Plant 1 eggplant per 5-gallon container, and because eggplants can get top-heavy and tall, push a stake or a small cage into the pot early so you don't disturb the roots later. They're thirsty plants in the heat, so check the soil daily. If the leaves wilt in the afternoon but perk back up in the evening, that's normal heat behavior, not a crisis. But if they're still drooping in the cool of morning, that's your sign the plant truly needs water. Watch for one common pest on patio eggplants, the flea beetle, which chews tiny shotgun pattern holes in the leaves. A young plant can usually outgrow the damage once it's established and the weather is hot, and floating row cover early in the season protects the small ones until they're big enough to shrug it off. Harvest the fruit while the skin is still glossy and firm, because a dull skin means it's past its prime and turning bitter inside. Now, if you've been gardening in the ground for years and you're thinking none of this container talk applies to you, here's something you can do this very weekend with what you already have. Take any vegetable that's struggling in your in-ground bed right now in the heat and look at the soil around it. Bare, sun-baked dirt can hit 140 degrees on the surface on a hot day, and that cooks the shallow feeder roots near the top. The fix costs nothing. Pile 2 or 3 inches of mulch around the base of those plants. Straw, dried grass clippings, shredded leaves, whatever you have on hand. That simple blanket can drop the soil temperature underneath by 10 to 20 degrees and slash how fast water evaporates. Your established plants will hold up dramatically better in the next heat wave, and you didn't buy a single thing. Mulch is the one trick that helps the seasoned in-ground gardener and the brand new balcony grower exactly the same way. So, whether you're working a 1/4 acre or 4 pots on a railing, the principle is identical. Keep those roots cooler than the air, and heat stops being your enemy. And if you want to go even deeper into exactly how to set up containers, choose the right soil mixes, and plan your harvest season by season, I put everything I know into a guide called The Container Harvest. It covers the full system, from choosing pots to maximizing yield in small spaces, and there's a field edition that's built to be your hands-on companion right in the garden. You can find the link in the description, and it's the most practical thing I've ever put together for growers who want real food from a real small space. With that in mind, let's climb deeper into the list, because at number 6, we reach a plant that turns a hot summer into a flood of food. At number 6, we have yard-long beans, sometimes called asparagus beans or snake beans, and they answer a complaint I hear constantly. Regular green beans, the bush and pole varieties, most people know, will stop flowering and stop setting pods when the heat really cranks up. They prefer mild weather, and a brutal summer can shut them down for weeks. Just when you want fresh beans most, the plant goes on strike. Yard-long beans never get that memo. They're not actually a common green bean at all. They're more closely related to the cowpea, and they come from hot, humid southern Asia. They climb, they sprawl, and they pump out long, slender, pencil-thin pods that can reach 1.5 feet long, sometimes longer if you let them. The hotter your summer, the happier they are. While the standard green beans sulk, these are climbing the trellis and dangling pods by the handful. Because they vine aggressively, they're perfect for a container with a tall support. Use a pot at least 5 gallons in size, push a sturdy trellis or a few tall stakes into it, and let the plant climb. Vertical growing like this is how a tiny balcony outproduces a big flat garden bed, because you're harvesting from the air, not just the ground. Keep the soil moist, and the plant will keep climbing and producing right through the worst of the season. Here's the key to tenderness. Pick the pods while they're still slim and firm, before the beans inside start to swell and bulge. At that young stage, they're crisp and sweet, and a quick stir fry brings out the best in them. Leave them too long and they turn tough and fibrous, so check the vine every day or two once it starts producing. And like all members of the bean and pea family, the roots actually pull nitrogen out of the air and feed it back into the soil, leaving your container richer than you found it. So yard-long beans hand you fresh pods straight through the dog days. But their humble relative, the one they descend from, might be the toughest survivor on this entire list. And that takes us to number 5. At number 5 are southern peas, the family that includes black-eyed peas, crowder peas, and cream peas. And here's the reframe that surprises people. We tend to think a vegetable needs rich soil, steady water, and constant care to produce well. Southern peas turn that idea on its head. They were bred for hardship. They produce best in heat, in poor soil, with very little fussing, and they often resent being pampered. There's real history here. These peas became a staple across the hot American South precisely because they thrive where finicky crops fail. They handle drought, they handle heat that climbs well past 100 degrees, and like their bean cousins, their roots host bacteria that capture nitrogen from the air, which is why they can grow lush in soil that would starve other vegetables. For someone gardening in a hot climate with limited resources, this plant is a quiet miracle. In a container, give them a pot at least 3 to 5 gallons, fill it with ordinary potting mix, and resist the urge to feed them heavily. Too much nitrogen fertilizer actually pushes them toward leaves instead of pods. Plant the seeds directly in the pot once the soil is good and warm. Water them in, and then let the surface dry slightly between waterings, because these plants genuinely tolerate a little neglect better than overwatering. You can harvest southern peas at 3 different stages, which is part of their charm. Pick them young and eat the whole pod like a snap bean. Let them fatten and shell out the fresh green peas. Or leave them on the plant until the pods dry completely, then store the dried peas for months. That flexibility means a few pots can feed you fresh now and stocked away for later. So, southern peas prove you can grow real protein-rich food in the worst heat with almost no inputs. But if it's pure, dense nutrition you're after, the next plant grows so fast in the heat it almost seems impatient. And that brings us to number 4. At number 4, we have amaranth. And most people in America only know it as a weed or a trendy grain in a health food store. They have no idea it's one of the finest hot weather vegetables on earth. The leafy types of amaranth are grown as a cooked green across Africa, Asia, the Caribbean, and Latin America, and they flourish in heat that would melt a lettuce plant into the ground. What makes amaranth remarkable is its biology. It uses a more efficient style of photosynthesis, the same advanced type that corn and sugarcane use, which lets it keep growing fast and strong in intense heat and bright sun, while ordinary greens shut down to protect themselves. That's not marketing, that's plant science. It's the reason a row of amaranth can be thriving and lush on the exact afternoon your spinach has given up entirely. And the leaves are genuinely nourishing, rich in iron, calcium, and protein, an old dependable food across much of the world. Growing it couldn't be simpler. The seeds are tiny, so just scatter a small pinch across the surface of a wide container of moist potting mix and barely cover them. They sprout quickly in warm soil, and within a few weeks you're pinching young leaves and tender stem tips for the kitchen. A pot 12 inches wide can hold several plants grown close together for a steady cut-and-come-again supply. Keep pinching the tops, and the plants stay bushy and leafy instead of rushing to flower. Cook the leaves like spinach, a quick sauté or steam, and that earthy, mild flavor really shines. And if you let a plant or two mature fully at the end of the season, those dramatic seed heads give you the famous amaranth grain too, so a single plant can feed you twice. Just know it, self-seeds enthusiastically, so harvest those seed heads before they scatter unless you want a permanent amaranth patch, which honestly isn't the worst problem to have. So, amaranth turns blazing sun into fast, nutritious greens. But the next plant doesn't just give you leaves, it gives you an entire underground harvest, and that leads us to number 3. At number 3 is the sweet potato, and the assumption to overturn here is a big one. People think of it as a difficult, sprawling southern farm crop that needs acres and a long, hot season to bother with. But a sweet potato is one of the most rewarding plants you can grow in a container, and it thrives in heat that would devastate an ordinary potato. The regular Irish potato is a cool season plant that struggles and stops forming tubers when the soil gets hot. The sweet potato is the opposite. It's a tropical vine from Central and South America that wants long, warm days and hot soil, and the more relentless heat you give it, the more it grows. It also pulls double duty, because the young leaves and shoots are an edible green eaten all over the world, so even while the roots are bulking up underground, you can harvest tender greens from the top. For containers, bigger is better. Use a large pot or grow bag, at least 10 to 15 gallons, give it a loose, well-draining mix, and plant rooted slips, which are just the sprouted shoots cut from a sweet potato. The vine will tumble over the sides and turn your patio lush and green all summer. Keep it watered, especially in the worst heat, and then have patience, because the magic is happening out of sight. After roughly 90 to 120 days, when the season is winding down, you tip the whole container out, and the reward is a tangle of sweet potatoes hiding in the soil. Here's a tip that makes a real difference. After you dig them, let the roots cure in a warm, humid spot for about a week to 10 days. Curing heals the skins and converts some of the starches to sugar, which is what makes a homegrown sweet potato taste so much sweeter than a store-bought one. Skip the curing and they're fine. Cure them properly and they're extraordinary, and they'll store for months. So a single grow bag can hand you both summer greens and a hidden treasure of roots come fall. But there are still 2 plants left. And the next one is the undisputed king of the southern summer garden, the plant that practically defines thriving in the heat. And that brings us to number 2. At number 2, we have okra. And if there's one vegetable that doesn't merely tolerate brutal heat, but seems to draw its strength from it, this is the one. While the rest of the garden droops in a 100-degree afternoon, an okra plant stands tall, deep green, flowering, and producing. It's in the same family as the hibiscus and the cotton plant, both lovers of long, hot southern summers. And it shows the science behind okra is all about warmth. The seeds barely bother to sprout in cool soil, but once the soil hits around 75 to 90 degrees, they germinate fast and the plant takes off. It keeps setting those beautiful pale yellow flowers and edible pods right through heat and humidity that shut almost everything else down. This is a plant that keeps a southern garden in fresh food during the worst weeks of summer, the weeks when nothing else wants to produce. For a hot patio with brutal afternoon sun, okra is almost impossible to disappoint. Give each plant a container around 5 gallons, set it in the very hottest, sunniest spot you have, and keep the soil consistently moist as it grows. The plants can get tall, so a deep pot helps with stability. Once it starts producing, here is the one rule that matters most. Pick the pods young and small when they're about 2 to 3 inches long and still tender. At that size, they're crisp and delicious. Wait too long and they turn woody and inedible almost overnight, and an overmature pod left on the plant signals it to slow down. So harvest every day or 2 during peak season and the plant just keeps pumping out more. One small heads up. The plants and pods have tiny prickly hairs that can itch some people's skin, so wear a long sleeve and a light glove when you pick. Or simply grow one of the spineless varieties that have been bred to be smooth. The flowers, by the way, are genuinely lovely, so okra earns its place on a patio twice over. So okra is the workhorse king of the heat. But the plant at number 1 is something most American gardeners have never even heard of, and once you understand it, you'll wonder why. That brings us at last to number 1. And the number 1 vegetable that doesn't just survive brutal summer heat but truly thrives in it is Malabar spinach. Here's the reframe that makes it so special. Real spinach is a cool weather crop that dies in the heat. Malabar spinach isn't spinach at all, and it does the exact opposite. The hotter and more humid it gets, the faster it grows. While your ordinary spinach is bolting and bitter in June, this plant is just getting started, and it will keep feeding you in lush, glossy abundance, straight through the worst of summer and deep into fall. Malabar spinach is a tropical vine from South Asia, and it's built for monsoon heat. It climbs with thick, fleshy stems and produces rounded, succulent leaves that taste mild and green, a little like spinach with a juicy, almost lemony note, and they hold up beautifully cooked into anything. Because it stores water inside those thick leaves and stems, it shrugs off the kind of dry, blazing afternoon that would flatten a normal green, and it's not a quick sprint of a plant. Once it's established and climbing, a single planting will keep producing harvest after harvest for months on end, all summer long, from those few seeds you started with. In frost-free regions, it behaves almost like a perennial, coming back year after year. And even where winter kills it, it self-seeds so reliably it often returns on its own. This is the perfect plant to grow up a trellis on a hot balcony or patio. Give it a pot, at least 5 gallons, push in a tall, sturdy support, and let it climb, because it can easily reach 6, 8, even 10 feet in a single hot season. Keep the soil moist, and the warmth will do the rest. The seeds, like a few others on this list, have a hard coat, so soak them overnight before planting to wake them up. You harvest by pinching off the leaves and the tender stem tips. And just like with so many of these heat lovers, that pinching makes the vine branch and produce even more. The more you pick, the more you get. Here's the detail that earns it the top spot. Malabar spinach gives you fresh, tender, nutritious greens during the exact window when fresh greens are supposed to be impossible, the dead heat of high summer. And it does it from a single trellis pot that takes up almost no floor space. It comes in a green-stemmed form and a striking red-stemmed form that looks gorgeous, climbing a railing, a vining wall of edible leaves, thriving in the heat that defeats every cool season crop, feeding you for months from one planting. That's why it's number one. So if you take one idea away from all of this, let it be this. A great summer garden was never about fighting the heat or owning a big yard or pouring in endless work and money. It's about choosing plants that were built for your conditions and giving them a few well-placed pots in the sun. The gardener who works with the season instead of against it always ends up with more, with less effort. The goal isn't perfection. It's consistency, a steady basket of food from a small, smart space week after week. If you'd rather grow real food simply in the space you actually have instead of overspending and overworking for it, then these plants were chosen for you. Pick just 2 or 3 from this list, start them this weekend, and let the heat do the heavy lifting. Now back to that question from the beginning. Tell me your growing zone, or just your state, and how hot your summers really get, and which of these 10 you're going to try first. Don't just think it. Actually type it in the comments below, because it genuinely helps other gardeners see what works, where they live. And if you'd like to keep growing more food with less space and less fuss, consider subscribing and joining this calm little community of people doing exactly that. Because in the next one, we're looking at the vegetables that quietly keep producing right through the first frosts of fall, when everyone else thinks the garden is finished. There's one on that list that actually tastes sweeter after a freeze. Stay with me and let's grow something wonderful together.